Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and I finally checked out the new Supergirl movie in theaters. And I mentioned earlier this year that Supergirl is genuinely the first DC film that I have been excited for in years. And that's saying something because I am a huge Marvel fan now. And when I was a kid, I was a huge DC fan until Zack Snyder came in and basically ran that franchise into the ground, so I hit switch teams to Marvel. But for the first time in forever, I have been really excited for a DC movie, mainly because the trailer they released last December looked really, really good. And the film itself was going to be based on an awesome comic book, probably one of the best we've gotten in recent years. And I did have my concerns going into this movie because I am part of the group that wasn't really impressed with Superman last year, but I had higher hopes because going into this movie, I can confidently say that Supergirl is one of my favorite DC characters, and I think I've always liked her more than I've ever liked Superman. Yes, we do exist. But I also had my concerns seeing the early reception to the movie through the critics and the early box office, which were kind of troubling for the film. So, without further ado, let's dive into this review and talk about Supergirl, and let's see if DC is once again in trouble only 2 movies into its cinematic universe. So we're going to start this review off by talking about the characters in the movie, and obviously we're going to start off with the title character herself, Supergirl. Millie Alcock definitely has cemented her legacy as a Supergirl because she is awesome. She is up there with the other Supergirl actors as being so great at taking over this role and genuinely adding the things to Supergirl that make her interesting. The fact that she is older than Clark was when she saw Krypton fall, so she has all that grief and heartbreak that Clark never got. And it leads to this character in this movie being kind of a more jaded superhero, and it honestly really works. Millie Alcock plays the character in such a great way, and it's such a blast to see her in this movie, and I genuinely hope that we get more movies with her in the DCU because she is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters in DC. And then you obviously have the big standout everyone likes to talk about, that being Jason Momoa finally getting to play the character of Lobo. And I'll openly admit that I've never been huge on his take on Aquaman, but he embodies the Lobo role so amazingly. And it's very clear this is the character Jason Momoa was always meant to play. And I'm so happy he finally got that moment. Also, we do get a few scenes in this movie where David Cornsweet appears as Superman, and it was really great seeing him again. I mentioned I was not very big on the Superman movie last year, but genuinely, David Cornsweet was the best part of that movie for me, and he's easily great here. I love seeing that we get the little scenes here where we still see the hopeful Superman, the symbol of hope that we're supposed to have, not whatever the hell Zack Snyder did. And overall, the couple scenes with him are great, even some of the flashbacks where we see Kara first arrive on Earth and Superman trying to adjust her to life on Earth was such a great scenes. But I do have some negatives on the characters. First off, Ruthie. I'm sorry to say this, but I kind of thought she was kind of useless through most of this movie. I mean, she's the catalyst for the entire story, and she's there throughout the whole film, but she never does anything in the movie that Supergirl herself couldn't have done. And even in most scenes, she came off to me a little bit more as annoying than as someone who deserved to be on the adventure. And it led to me being a little bit not happy with her character. And it means that I don't know about her. I'm still on the fence about her as a character. And then we obviously got to talk about the main villain of this movie, Krem. And I'm honestly going to say this straight up. He is now my least favorite villain in any superhero movie I've ever seen. He is the kind of character where we never learn anything about him. We never learn anything about his motivations, his backstory, the reason why he does what he does. they never delve into that at all. And genuinely, he's so uninteresting to watch on screen. He honestly makes every scene he's in worst. And I can give Marvel this, at least when they made shitty villains like Malekith and Hulk King and Ezekiel Sims, they at least made them interesting to watch on screen. Krem, there is nothing to talk about with that character, and that is sad for a superhero movie villain. Like, I at least would have things to say about the bad Marvel villains. I generally have nothing to say about Krem, and it means that this movie has no compelling threat because, like, I don't care about Krem in the slightest. But that's my thoughts on most of the major characters. Of course, there's a bunch of side characters in this movie that I don't really want to delve too deep in because the main six are kind of the main ones you really want to know about. So the characters are fine. There's three great ones, two kind of mediocre one. There's one mediocre one and then one really terrible one. So I think the balance is pretty all right for this movie, and the characters are overall probably the standout. Next up, we're going to talk about the story, and I'm going to say that the story is actually pretty well paced. I will say that this movie moves at a very quick, snappy pace, and genuinely, you don't really feel the movie slowing down at any point, which I think is actually good because it means that I was entertained throughout the whole film, and I didn't have to check my watch every 5 minutes to see how much longer I had to go in the movie. So I would say that that's really great. And I will say, if we have to talk about any pacing issues, I'd say the beginning is a little slow. But other than that, everything after we get past the beginning and we start going on the adventure, everything picks up and goes pretty fast. I'll also say that I really love the soundtrack in this movie. There are some great music tracks in this, and obviously, like usual, a lot of them have found their way onto my playlist after this. And of course, the action scenes are great, especially that final battle. And there's a couple earlier on fights that look pretty cool. I will say that kind of blending these two thoughts together, I know everyone keeps talking about how the needle drop in the final battle is really bad. Can I ask a serious question? What needle drop are you all talking about? Because I went into this movie knowing you guys had issues with it, but like I could not pick out where the needle drop was that everyone has an issue with because every song in the final battle sounded fine to me within the context of the movie. So I genuinely don't know what needle drop everyone's having an issue with, and even if I knew what the needle drop is, I wouldn't have an issue with it because like I said, I didn't even notice there was a problem, so I don't know why everyone's so ticked off, but whatever. And the other main negative I have to give the story is there's so many contrivances in the plot in this movie that genuinely tick me off a little bit. One is the Supergirl suit. The Supergirl suit was one of the main things that was marketed for this movie because genuinely it looks so good. It's probably one of my favorite Supergirl suits in live action, but they came up with this really dumb reason in the story to why Millie Alcock never wears the suit until the final battle. And realistically, it means that she's in that trench coat civilian clothing for most of the film when I kind of just wished she was in Supergirl suit. So that's kind of annoying. And other than that, they also keep coming up with a lot of really dumb reasons as to why Supergirl can't just win straight up and how Krem can keep escaping and it just exists to pad out the runtime. Like, there's a whole plot point in this movie, spoilers a little bit, when they go to this final planet where Krem is hiding. There's this green sun which can kill Supergirl, but they put her in a cave where she's dying and Ruthie goes off to take on Krem by herself just to get captured anyway. And it has no agency in the plot because Supergirl then just shows up 10 minutes later after the sun goes down. And it's like, did we need the Green Sun plot point? Like, it kind of just feels like a reason for Ruthie to get kidnapped instead of having Supergirl save the day. So, I don't know. Other than that, though, the story is fine in my opinion. It doesn't follow the comic as closely as it should have, which is a little unfortunate, but it's a fine enough movie on its own, but it's also not the kind of story that's going to change your life, unfortunately. Now, I know there's a lot of discourse right now with DC, with the release of Supergirl and all of that, and I just wanted to give my 2 cents on it here at the end of this review, so if you don't care, you can skip to my outro just to get my score and stuff, but the DCU right now is really confusing to me because I saw it best described as with the movies and TV shows that they are planning to release in the DCU. Someone put it perfectly in a tweet that I saw saying, "Why are we making Phase 4 MCU content in Phase 1 of the DCU?" Because there's so many things getting released right now that genuinely I ask why they're being the things focused on. Like, they revealed to us that we're getting a Deathstroke and Bane movie. Why are you prioritizing a Deathstroke and Bane movie when we haven't even gotten a Batman movie in the DCU? Like, why would you do that? Same thing as like the first look we're getting at DC in the DCU, at Gotham, I mean, in the DCU, is gonna be through a Clayface movie. Even in the same vein, like, there's no updates on things like Wonder Woman movie, a Batman movie, and instead they're prioritizing other things, like movies that genuinely I question why they're the things being focused on, because I genuinely think James Gunn is a little bit confused. Like, I kind of think he doesn't realize that he doesn't have the audience he thinks he does. The MCU was able to do some of the experimental stuff they did in Phase 4 because it had its audience cemented. They were able to do side projects like She-Hulk or Moon Knight that didn't really connect to anything going on and were just experiments because they had an audience and they were just going to try out to see if it worked. But the DC doesn't have the audience the MCU did because it's a general mix of people are just kind of tired of bad superhero movies. And also the fact that DC has basically spent the last decade running its brand into the ground in the form of the DCEU basically crashing and burning and the comic sales going down. Like, I kind of looked it up before this. Like, the only side of DC that made any money in the last decade was anything Batman related, and then the Lego stuff, that being the Lego video games, the Lego cartoons, and the sets. So DC doesn't have the fan base that Marvel has. And in fact, Marvel's lost most of its fan base. So the fact is, I don't think the DC was prioritizing the right stuff. It should not be doing side plots. Like, as much as I kind of enjoyed Supergirl, I kind of wished we waited on a Supergirl solo film. Like, I feel like you should have done a Superman movie with Supergirl serving a main role, and then you could do a side project after people care about that character. Even in the same vein, prioritize getting to a Justice League project. Start doing things like a Batman movie, a Wonder Woman movie, things for Cyborg, an actually good Green Lantern, and The Flash. I promise you, James Gunn, the Flash movie bombing was not a result of us not liking the Flash character. It was for completely different reasons. Make a Flash movie that is good, we will show up for it. And genuinely, I think we also are taking the Supergirl failing as a huge blow to the DCU because DC still is in a pretty decent state right now, but I feel like we need to wait to do this talk on is DC running into the ground again, because in a year from now, like right now, just having one movie in the DCU completely bomb is not the worst thing ever. Let's check back in a year from now after we have Clayface, Lanterns, and the second Superman movie before we really start talking about is the DCU actually crashing and burning. At the end of the day, Supergirl was a very enjoyable film. It had a lot of things to love about it, but it also had way too many issues, and it kind of makes it one of the most generic superhero movies that I've kind of ever seen. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give this film a 6 out of 10. And I think it just is unfortunate that it's a generic superhero film in a time where superhero movies in general aren't making the same money that they used to. But at the end of the day, Supergirl is still better than like 80% of stuff that was released during the DCEU time period. So honestly, I'd say DC is not in trouble yet. But once again, let's check back in like a year from now, because if we end up having like Lanterns, Clayface, and Man of the Second Superman movie being garbage, then maybe we can have that conversation about DC being in trouble. But without further ado, I want to know if you guys have seen Supergirl. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts on the film, and maybe we can get a conversation going. But without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video. I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!